Que pasa YouTube, aka what's up YouTube, how's it going everybody? Have for y'all today a pretty awesome video. We are going to be ranking all of the drafts in the second season of the Galar Defenders League, which I am a co-commissioner of, and I am not alone here for this video. We have the new co-commissioner for season 2, which is OGalbina. Say what's up, OG.
What's up? I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to jump into some power rankings. Be sure to check out all the coaches and go check out their draft analysis to explain, see why they drafted all the Pokemon that they did and all that good stuff. So you can get their explanation of it, but this is just going to be our side and what we think they're strong with and what we think they could work on.
So yeah, this video essentially will just be us kind of ranking all the drafts, how we perceive them to be worst to best. And let us know if you guys agree with our rankings, or let us know which is your favorite draft out of our entire roster for the season. Now, if you may have missed any of the coaches' draft analysis, then we will be leaving a playlist of all the draft analysis down in the description below of this video, as well as a link to every single coach this season of GDL Season 2. We did expand from 12 coaches to 16 coaches, so we have a bunch of awesome new players in this season and a lot of really awesome drafts. So check everybody out. If you're excited for this, hammer arm that thumbs up button down below. Check out our coaches, follow the Twitter and all that going on. This is not going to be us technically knocking any of the drafts or saying like anything is essentially terrible than the other. Just from first glance, we figured that, hey, maybe this might be better than that, or that's better than this. But you never know, like the rank 14 team could end up winning the entire season. And that's kind of the fun thing about like ranking drafts. Like you don't really necessarily know where something might be actually good or something might be really bad. Like a really bad draft or a really low ranked draft could surprise everybody. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the fun thing about ranking drafts here and there. What do you think, OG?
Yeah, like Leo said, a lot of this comes down to personal preference as well. It might be a team that a coach is super comfortable with, that has a lot of models that they've performed really well with in the past, whereas me or Leo might not really like the composition of the team, but they could perform phenomenally with it or something like that, and obviously prove us dead wrong. So take these with a grain of salt. It's just kind of a brief outlook at the teams just on paper at the very least.
Even though we are in the roster for the season, we're just 2 players. So we're not the deciding factor of whether or not a draft is absolutely amazing or absolutely terrible. So with that being said, we want to give a huge shout out to OddsAre for making the amazing graphics for this GDL Season 2. His Twitter link will be down in the description for you guys to go ahead and check out. And I think with that being said, we can get these officially started. So as you can see here, we have our first 4 picks for our rankings. Now we are going to be starting from bottom to top, so 16 to 14, etc., etc. So for my number 16, I had the New England Snowcloaks, and Ogle had the New Jersey Brobats, which, to be fair, New Jersey Brobats were my 15. So why do you think that the New Jersey Brobats are 16?
So when I looked at Root's team, I didn't think it was necessarily okay. So it wasn't that there's necessarily like, unmons or mons that aren't great on the team. I think it has a lot of great standalone mons. Like Necro is a freaking menace. Necro is an absolute menace to play around, especially in draft. It's a beast. You have mons like Obstagoon, which are great. You have mons like Dracozolt, which can be really scary. But when I look at this team, one, very, very slow. You have Cinderace, and then I believe it drops all the way down to Obstagoon, which I don't like that speed tier gap very much. And the rest of the team kind of just falls off from there as well. But other than that, there's not a lot of synergy with this team. It seems like it's just different mons taken and thrown together. Like something I see off the offset is like you would think like, oh, Necro and DD male, obviously the psychic spam core. But I don't think Necro's that kind of psychic type to really take advantage of that kind of terrain. You could prove me wrong, but we'll see from there. It's just this team lacks a lot of synergy in my eyes, and everything just kind of seems out of place.
Yeah, I will agree. Like the Indeedee doesn't really add any type of benefit to everything, and I also agree that Root's speed tiers, the coach of the New Jersey Brobats, are a little bit weird. Like, there's a huge gap between Cinderace directly to Obstagoon. So from the 100 or so range down to directly under 100 is definitely something that Root's opponents are going to be able to take advantage of. Although Necrozma in itself is a giant issue, so if Root can properly build around Necrozma, then that will give his team a little bit more merit. Like, his Stealth Rockers are also not really that great. And in my opinion, even though, yes, heavy duty boots are a thing now in Generation 8, Stealth Rocks, regardless, are still something that you always need to consider drafting or consider prepping around, because even though, yes, you may have like one heavy duty boots mon, that doesn't mean the rest of your team is immune to entry hazard damage unless you're running 6 Pokemon full of heavy duty boots Pokemon, which I feel like that might be a huge thing for me going through most of these rankings. Like, yeah, boots are really good, but hazards are still a thing. So the main reason why I personally had the New England Snowcloaks under the New Jersey Brobats is that if you look at Liv's team, it's really good. Like, Zarude definitely has a lot of potential to just be a giant problem. Gmax Hatterene is also kind of terrifying if it is able to Trick Room, and then if it Trick Rooms, it gets a few free turns to just do absolute immense damage. But the main thing that I really didn't like about Liv's team is that she drafted Charjabug. That's a Charjabug, right?
It is a Charjabug, yeah.
Yeah, so this basically means she only has 10 viable Pokemon. Now, you can have 10 spectacular Pokemon and draft the most absolute least useful mon ever, which is fine, but in this draft, there's nothing that sticks out particularly too amazing to me. Like, again, Zarude, again, does have potential. Alakazam, yeah, that could be cool with, like, Focus Sash. I mean, it gets Nasty Plot, but it's still extremely frail. Even if it's Sash Nasty Plot, it can be picked off with priority, potentially. Alolan Marowak also doesn't really seem like the best offensive type of mon, and then type Null is really her best answer to offensive Ghost. So whoever drafted Gengar or potentially Gmax Gengar can kind of just go in against this. So yeah, in the end, it was kind of more or less the fact that she only has 10 viable mons that I really put her here at 16.
Team, I will say, I agree with a lot of these. I had written down in my notes is one of the biggest things that really hurts us is if type Null doesn't come. Like you said, it gets smashed by an offensive Ghost because Zarude isn't the sturdiest dark type in the world. And another big thing about this draft is there's a lot of bulkier, more annoying mons on this team, and she does have good hazard control in the double spin option, and obviously the Magic Johnson Hatterene and stuff like that. Potential defog Scyther, but there's no grounded poison, which I also don't like on bulkier builds and stuff like this. Like, I get there's Zan, Zarude, Haxorus, but a lot of these mons are a lot more naturally fat, and I want to appreciate that shit. So I think that's also going to kind of wound this team a little bit. The one thing I did like about this team though is the option to go really fast with stuff like Zam, Zarude, like a Scarf Zarude, Scyther, things like that. Like the top speed tiers being decent, but also having a great Trick Room aspect in Hatterene plus what do you call it, a Alola Marowak. I think that can also be very solid for her.
Yeah, that's not too bad. She does have some good options to potentially control speed tiers, which, to be fair, I've noticed in Gen 8, like, controlling speed tiers are definitely very beneficial. So yeah, moving on to our 15 rankings. I already went over the New Jersey Brobats. You had at 15 the Tasmanian Toxicroaks, which I had at number 11. So let us know why you put them at number 15.
So yeah, this is going to be Max's team. I think this team, like, start off with positives. I think it has a really solid defensive backbone. It's really, really fat and annoying between Tangrowth and Corsola and Umbreon, and Rhyperior being great with, especially with that wish support from Umbreon and things like that. Gardevoir being decently naturally bulky, Orbeetle being a beast to kill. The only thing I don't like with this team, especially with this fatter team, one is that it doesn't have a grounded poison. I don't like that with fatter builds.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, a grounded poison is always needed.
Yeah, and I understand he does have Silvally, which obviously can circumvent that. That's, the benefit of bringing Silvally or drafting and stuff like that, but being forced into Silvally poison every week isn't the nicest thing. Another thing I noticed is he drafted around Dragovish. Obviously, that was his round 1 pick. But I noticed outside of Vish, he lacks really any immediate breaking power. There's nothing on this team where I'm like, oh man, what do I do besides Vish? And outside of that too, one of the things that really stops Vish is a good bulky grass, and I don't see this team breaking fat grasses very well outside of Orbital, which I think can also arise a big issue for him when he's depending so much on Dragovish for his offense, and his fat's very liable to be worn down, especially when he doesn't have a grounded poison. I feel like this team's gonna stick around a lot in the early game, and it's gonna kind of lose that war of attrition if he doesn't play very aggressively, or he doesn't potentially make a drop maybe to pick up a grounded poison. I think that's the biggest thing that really sunk this team for me, is no grounded poison in such a fat build is really rough in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. His Dracofish answers might not be the entirely best options that he could have got. His stealth rockets are really good, which is definitely something I did like. His speed tiers are entirely that bad. I definitely do agree that his team doesn't have the best immediate power ever, but he does have some good setup options in potentially Gardevoir, the Silvally, and the Cobalion, which I'm guessing it kind of seems like he kind of based his draft off of. Like, him not having any immediate power isn't necessarily the worst thing ever, just because Umbreon is able to pass wishes. Tangrowth, being such a bulky fat mon, can always pivot in and out. And then, yeah, again, not having any type of poison type is really, really bad. But at the same time, Ditto being able to answer any opposing setup sweepers is also really nice. I'm not sure if I did really like the Orbital pick as his G-Max mon, but Sticky Webs are nice. Orbital, if it does get a chance to set up, can definitely be a giant issue to potentially deal with. So yeah, I definitely see it potentially being a lower round pick, even though I had it a little bit higher on my spectrum. But moving on to 14 here, I had Matt O'Shea and the Montreal Milotics at 14, and you had Grandmaster D-Ray and the San Diego Snugglers at number 14. So the main thing for me when it came to Matt O'Shea is that his electric answers are really not the best. Like, yeah, he does have Palossand and Raichu, but Raichu is one of those mons that you probably aren't going to be bringing every single week. So even if an electric type Pokemon does have a secondary answer to electric immunities, it's going to be able to bop them. Palossand and Crustle are also not the best stealth rockers in my opinion, and not to knock Matt, but G-Max Corviknight doesn't necessarily seem like the best G-Max mon to get. Like, him having Urshifu, in my opinion, would have put him a little bit higher, but the fact that he has G-Max Corviknight, and that once Raichu's gone, any electric type with coverage gets rid of Palossand, then that's going to be a giant problem. Like yeah, Roserade is there, but there's also 5 other Pokemon that can help get rid of Roserade. His speed tiers are also kind of bad. It goes from Raichu to Charizard to Roserade, which, to be fair, late game, you don't really want to have a Choice Scarf Charizard, especially if rocks are up, or you don't want to have a Choice Scarf Roserade, or potentially a Choice Scarf Porygon Z. But what I do like about Matt's team is that he has teleport into his offensive mons, being Roserade, Porygon Z, Urshifu, or potentially even Raichu. Like, Basculin as well as one of his lower tier picks is really, really nice, but let's be honest, how many times is he actually going to bring Basculin?
So I had Matt a little bit higher. I totally agree with you. The biggest thing that really helped this team back for me was the speed, because like you said, Raichu is a mon that's going to be coming to, honestly, more than a third of your games. I love Raichu. I think it's a dope lower tier pick, but it's not coming very often. So his team is very, very slow on that spectrum. One thing I do obviously love is not only the teleport into Urshifu, but I think Urshifu PZ is a really, really nasty offensive core. I really love those two together. And I think with like Sylveon plus Slowbro and, you know, potentially Corviknight supporting those two, they could be very, very scary. But yeah, the biggest issue for this team, in my opinion, is it just being it being a little bit slow, and the electric problem is definitely big. Like I think when this team plays Zero Aura, it's not going to have a good time at all. I think Zero Aura just dismantles this team on matchup. When your best check, I think, is Raichu, because knockoff and grass dot and stuff like that for Palisand. It's looking a little rough, but it's a solid team overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a solid draft, but it definitely has those very, very peculiar flaws. Sure. Like, how many times are you really going to bring Crustle with Stealth Rocks over Palisand? Now, again, boots are an item, but your opponent is not going to be running an entire team full of boots mons. So you still want something to get up rocks, which more than likely is going to be Palisand. And even though rocks kind of got nerfed because of boots, you still want to get that initial chip damage on your opponent to help your other offense. So yeah, like I feel like Matt can definitely make this work. I just wish he had better stealth rock or just hazard options in the end, I would say. And then again, I'm not really a big fan of G-Max Corviknight. At 14, you had D-Ray and the San Diego Snugglers.
So D-Ray started off his draft. He picked up, oh my gosh, I'm on the wrong picture. He ended up picking up Melmetal off of the bat, and he picked up some really cool mons to support it, like Slowking and Clefable, which I think this is his updated roster. I think Odds actually grabbed this off the
yeah, okay, so this is probably after the trades were made before week 1 or by week 2. So yeah, we apologize. Originally, Grandmaster D-Ray did have Clefable on this draft, but then he made some trades. So yeah, we apologize about that.
It's still kind of the same-ish problems. Yeah, it's not like it's a crazy different roster.
Yeah, so I mean, these rosters are what's essentially going to happen throughout the remainder of the season. So like, even if it's like 1 or 2 weeks, it's not that big of an issue, I think.
Yeah. So looking at D-Ray's team, one thing I did notice is that he obviously supported Melmetal well. He had double teleport originally with the Clef, and he had good wish support into it. He had Trick Room teleport with the Slowking, which is obviously nice. But something about his team initially, and he passed this up a little bit, but something about his team initially is how slow it was and how Trick Room reliant it was. And I think Trick Room is great. I love controlling speed in different ways. Obviously, stopping your opponent from just running a Scarf and outspeeding everything on your team. Being able to control in different ways is great. But I believe he had, what was it? Like 4 or 5 mons that were still chilling at base 30 speed by themselves. And it's not that he didn't have Pokemon that patched those speed tiers in between. He didn't have Mienshao originally, but he had Crocodile, which is decently fast. He had Noivern, which is decently fast. He originally had Virizion over Mienshao. So that also hit that 108 speed tier, which is obviously nice. But when 20% of your team is hitting those different speed tiers and the rest of them are chilling at the same one at the bottom, your team can be really, really easily exploited in that. And outside of Melmetal, I noticed too, this team was super reliant on it. Outside of Melmetal and maybe Crocodile, there wasn't an immediate, powerhouse. There wasn't any immediate offense to really take advantage of that Trick Room. Maybe you could say G-Max lacks decently strong mon, but it's not, super, super terrifying, especially without an item when it can't curse up and things like that as terrifying, or even belly drum up under Trick Room. I think this team was solid. It just was a little bit too heavy on the Melmetal Trick Room teleport support idea and got a little bit too tunnel vision in that regard.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like, him dropping Clefable, in my opinion, was a really bad option, honestly. Like, in general, Clefable is like one of the best Pokemon. So the fact that he dropped that for the rest of the season was a little bit baffling to me. But the nice thing that I did like about D-Ray's draft is that he has so many good answers to fighting types or anything that would essentially deal with Gigantamax Snorlax. He has Slowking, he has a Weezing, he has Delmise, Noivern, even Roselia, I guess, to an extent. His speed tiers, again, are really, really bad, but he does still kind of have that Trick Room option, which I guess gives more viability to whatever his offense essentially is. Teleport into Melmetal can also be absolutely terrifying, which is really, really nice. Noivern is absolutely one of my favorite Pokemon currently in Draft League Gen 8 format, because with heavy duty boots is it's so amazing. I guess you could say that his stealth rockers could be way better because his options are Crocodile or Colossal, which, let's be honest, Crocodile would rather be a stealth rocker over Colossal. Colossal is just one of those mons that you're probably never going to bring to any type of matchup, but Crocodile also is a mon that doesn't necessarily want to run stealth rocks. Like the fact that it has a free move slot is what also really benefits Crocodile. So I did think this draft was a little bit better, but I can definitely still kind of see its flaws. He does have a nice regen core between Slowking and Mienshao, which isn't the worst ever. His hazard removal also isn't entirely too bad. The main issue that I have with this draft are its speed tiers, because again, it is very reliant on Trick Room, but I really felt like it was much better than some of the other drafts that I had under it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to 13 here, which is going to be, for me, the Scandinavian Southlands, and for OG, the Lake District Spirits.
Yeah, so I have Dr. Slacking as Lake District Spirits. Off the bat, this team's also obviously pretty scary, and I think this like 13 to like 8-7-ish range or around there is very mix and matchy. You can honestly kind of swap the teams out throughout. I don't think this is a bad team overall. I love the rain offense idea. Obviously, Pelipper, Kingdra, Barraskewda is terrifying, especially Kingdra, Barraskewda. Those two together are terrifying to deal with offensively. They wear down each other's checks like crazy. Obviously, having the flip turn option was really, really cool. Seismitoad's a great rocker for this team. Having a ground that's not weak to electric is great, and no hidden powers existing is great. That Ferrothorn is super, super solid. Heliolisk, obviously great on rain. Zoroark, Dreadnought, I don't think was a very needed Pokemon on this team. You already have like the rain offense overload idea in Barraskewda, Kingdra. I don't necessarily see what Dreadnought offers that Barraskewda doesn't, other than rocks, and I feel like there might be better Pokemon in the tiers to grab rocks off of besides that. Clefairy, decent fairy type in itself, but pretty low tier. My only gripes with this team is how one-dimensional it is. I love rain in draft, but I don't like hard rain. Just rain offense to the wall, and if that doesn't work, the game's over. Because if an opponent has a good rain matchup, they matches up decent against it, then you don't have much to really play around that. This team doesn't function very well outside of rain. I don't see a team that you can really bring in 90% of matchups that doesn't get shafted if it's not rain itself. And another thing I did want to mention about this is a rain team without a single freeze dry resist. This is a very good move. It's a very much more widely distributed move in this generation, and a good Pokemon with the move freeze dry kind of 2-hit KOs or OHKOs the entirety of Dr. Slacking's team here, which is a little bit scary. But like I said, it's not a bad team. It's just a little too reliant on rain for my taste.
That's the thing about it, though, is that because this team is so offensively based, I had this higher up on my rankings. Even though, yes, I agree that a draft just being purely rain based is not necessarily the best thing ever, is that he does have options outside of just manual rain to get his sweepers in. Like defensively wise, the Mega Venusaur and the Clefairy can definitely be options. Although I will agree that Mega Venusaur on this type of build is really, really odd. But I think the way that he kind of saw himself drafting this team is that it's just going to be a purely offensive type of draft, which if he keeps most of his matchups to like 4 or 5 offensive mons and like the random wall here or there, then I definitely think that Dr. Slunking can definitely pull a lot of victories out with this type of build. Again, you look at it on paper, it's kind of like, well, what is going on here? Like, it's so hard focused on rain. What are the other outside options? But if Slacking can focus his team just purely around the rain core, purely keeping up rain, which to be fair, he probably could outside of maybe like 1 or 2 coaches, then this is definitely a draft that I could see making it very, very far through this season. I really don't think he should have drafted Dreadnought. He probably should have had a better Stealth Rocker, but outside of that, like, I can definitely see this draft having a lot of potential, but again, it's just so reliant on one certain aspect.
And then for your number thing, you had the Scandinavian Stoutlands. I had them a tiny bit higher. What did you have them?
So for my 13, I had Skyrender and the Scandinavian Stoutlands. So the main thing I liked about Skyrender's team is the fact that he had Rillaboom, Zeraora, and Hawlucha. Those three alone are a pretty good core in my opinion. I guess the kind of downside about this is that he doesn't really have any good hazard options. Wigglytuff is not a Pokemon. Claydol is not a Pokemon. Barbaracle, like, when are you ever realistically bringing Barbaracle for anybody sitting? Like, I'll wait like a few seconds so you can comment, but let's be honest, are you bringing Barbaracle, OG?
Bringing Barbaracle, you're definitely bringing it as your rocker. We'll say that. You're bringing it
even as a rocker, it's really not that good. And then, like,
well, yeah,
to be fair,
yeah.
no, I mean, yeah, like, to be fair, I do like the Klefki. Klefki, I guess, in a sense, could be really nice because if Skyrender does go kind of like priority screens with Rillaboom and Grassy Seed as the Hawlucha, that could be an amazing win option for him. But let's be honest, how many times is he going to bring dual screens Klefki plus Rillaboom into Grassy Seed as the Hawlucha? Probably not that much. But the nice thing about this draft is that he still has good offensive options. Like, yeah, again, Barbaracle, not a Mon. Claydol, not a Mon. Alolan Eggy, probably not a Mon either, or Wigglytuff. But Crawdon's knockoff, like, there's really nothing that switches into Crawdon. Zeraora alone is already such an amazing Pokemon in the format. Rillaboom having access to Grassy Glide and Swords Dance is really disgusting. And then Hawlucha is also a potential offensive Mon that needs to be prepped for. But the main thing I really didn't like about Skyrender's draft is that his Gmax is not necessarily the most viable one. He also has a few Pokemon that he most likely will never bring throughout the entire season. Alright, so moving on to our next ranking here. At number 12, I have the Vancouver Corver Knights, coached by the SB Tornadoes, and Ogel has the Copenhagen Salzbucks, coached by Frosted.
I have Frosted at 12. I do like Frosted's team. Obviously, Excadrill is phenomenal this generation. Sand's always scary, but it's not, just good in sand. Obviously, there's the Mold Breaker option, Spin Buff. Great Pokemon. Excadrill plus Salazzle is a offensive core I really, really like as well. It's obviously really, really solid. Salazzle really breaking those bulky grasses that Excadrill doesn't appreciate, and, the main stops to it and all that good stuff. Obviously, they both still struggle with waters, but there's more Pokemon for that on the spot, obviously, to deal with that. One thing I don't like about this team very much is the random hail aspect thrown in there. I'm not a big fan of the double weather, especially when it's just two Mon cores. Like, we have a tiny 2-Mon sand core and a tiny 2-Mon hail core, and with the hail core being so subpar, I feel like it could have been done without, and maybe something else could have been swapped in and out to optimize the team. Because I'll be real, Beartic's a cool Pokemon. It's one of those Pokemon that's not coming to more than 1 or 2 matchups. It's not great. It's not even that fast when you are, factoring in the Slush Rush or anything like that. So a little bit subpar, but not the worst thing in the world. Something that's obviously really solid about this team is that defensive core of like Mandibuzz, Hippo, Vaporeon is going to be really annoying for teams to break, which is obviously solid. But overall, the Sand Core is awesome. There's a lot of pressure on Excadrill though to really perform very well. There's not a lot of setup or fast offensive starts to really win the game other than Drill. Potentially like a Scarf Passimian or maybe Salazzle in a couple few niche matchups can do really well in that aspect. But the team really struggles overall in breaking bulky grasses for Excadrill as well outside of Salazzle. So maybe that could arise an issue, but decent team overall.
No, yeah, that's fair. I do agree that the hail aspect of this draft is a little bit odd, but at the same time, we kind of had to take into consideration that Alola Ninetales does get Aurora Veil up, so because when it always comes in, it gets the Veil up, which is also very beneficial to something like Swords Dance Excadrill, when she has the option to bring in something like a Powdon with getting the Sand up while still having Veil up, and then in comes Excadrill, Swords Dance, and then from there it could potentially sweep. Another nice thing about this draft too, I had this very, very higher up on my personal rankings, but another thing I did like about this draft is honestly the double weather aspect. Like Beartic in Hail may be something that some coaches might overlook, which in my opinion would be a bit of an issue. Honestly, if you're ever prepping for this team, I don't think you should ever exclude Beartic being potentially brought to a draft just because this team is double weather. Another real nice thing I liked about Frost's draft is that she had G-Max Inteleon, which in itself is extremely fast and can hit extremely hard. It gets access to ways of boosting its speeds here, which in itself is really, really amazing. She has some good momentum in Baton Pass or Flip Turn Vaporeon paired with Volt Switch Rotom or U-Turn Pessimian. She has U-Turn Mandibuzz as well. I guess her Stealth Rockers could be a little bit better. Like, she doesn't really have the best hazard options, but even though that is a big factor, she still does have some good offensive options. So for my number 12, I put the Vancouver Corviknights, coached by SV Tornado. Now, to be honest, this draft seems really kind of odd. Like, it seems really weird. Like, he has the electric terrain for Alolan Raichu, which isn't necessarily that bad, but G-Max Blastoise seems extremely out of place. Like, he does kind of have good offensive options in Dragology, Terrakion, and Tauros, but outside of that, I don't really know what he was kind of planning for this draft. I know you had him a little bit higher, which to be honest, I would be interested to know why, but his speed tiers are really weird. As you mentioned in your notes, Magnezone kind of seems out of place. Like, he has so many common weaknesses that I don't really know what he was kind of planning with this draft. But besides that, again, his offense is not necessarily that bad. Like, Terrakion is extremely hard to switch in. Tauros' coverage is amazing. Alolan Raichu being able to gain a double speed in electric terrain is really, really good as well. Dragology offensively is also a bit of an issue to switch into. Volcarona with heavy duty boots is also a giant problem. And he does have some decent defoggers in Drifblim, which also gets access to Unburden. He's got Rapid Spin Blastoise, and he's got a defog priority from the Whimsicott. But yeah, let me know, why did you rank this a little bit higher, OG?
So for me, you kind of touched on it. I love his offense. I think Volk plus Terrakion is terrifying offensively up at the top, especially when you kind of factor in that mini terrain core that we're talking about in the Alola Raichu Pincurchin, but also Drifblim. But mainly that Pincurchin Alola Raichu, obviously, they force a lot of damage on, and really scare out a lot of the checks to Volk and things like that, and to Terrakion, which I really do like for this build. As for G-Max Blastoise, I don't think it's the worst fit on this team overall. I think when we think of it, we're thinking of a big offensive G-Max bomb, but I think as a bulky water, it actually fits on this team pretty well, and providing spin support and things like that for this team, because it doesn't have the best hazard removal. Like, you have Whimsicott, you have, I think Drifblim gets defog. I don't remember off the top
It
of my head.
does. It does.
90. I'm like 90. Yeah, okay. So it does get defog, which is nice. So I don't think Blastoise is the worst thing in the world defensively for this team, and obviously putting a good sponge to this team and forcing damage on, a lot of those scary mons. And when Volk beats a lot of the things that Blastoise is really checked by, I think it could be a lot more scary offensively in that sense. Maybe getting a rapid spin off and then being an offensive set afterwards, maxing out, doing a lot of damage, all that stuff. The biggest gripe I have with this team, because I don't have it much higher, but the biggest gripe I have with this team is it's so ground weak. This team,
that's pretty big.
When the Soul Ground resist is Whimsicott, and the Soul Ground immunity is Drifblim, a good offensive ground is gonna just massacre this team.
Yeah,
Like
basically
Excadrill
anything with
has a
Edgequake.
field day. Yeah, we just talked about Excadrill, and that one has a field day against this team. Like there's nothing for it. So I mean, like I guess defensive Sandaconda maybe.
Hey, you never
But
know.
yeah, other than that, I do like the offensive core. I wish there wasn't a Magna Zone. I feel like maybe something better could have been patched there because it doesn't really accomplish much on this build in particular. There's nothing that really even appreciates the Magna pull on this build, in all honesty. Maybe I guess like an offensive Whimsicott or something like that, but you already have Volk Terrakion. You don't need to trap steals. You already have things you can exploit with that. So it's not the worst team overall. It doesn't have great defensive synergy, that's for sure. I don't think that the slightest, but I do think offensively, if he can play aggressive enough and position himself well, he can really set up good endgames for Terrakion and Volcarona with this build.
It's kind of like Frost's team, where if he can just play it aggressively enough, then with the terrain benefit, it should be pretty good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, so moving on to our next ranking here, we have the Tasmanian Toxicrooks, 11 for me, which I already went over, and then we have 11 for OGalbina, which is Happy Valley Hariyama's coached by Mario B.
So I have Mario's team here. Something right off the bat that I really love about this team, I love Darm plus Rillaboom. I think they're actually really phenomenal together offensively. They cover each other great, and I think Galvantula actually helps those two out great as well. I do like the whip support for Darm to where you're not forced to a Scarf every week, or even just for an SD Rillaboom or something like that. Though it does get the Grassy Glide. It's nice for the other faster mons like Grassy Glide isn't going to hit necessarily. Some potential gripes that I have with this team. Again, this is all coming down to personal preference. I'm much more of an offensive player, and if I'm grabbing momentum with these mons, outside of Rilladarm and maybe Gal, this team lacks a lot of immediate offensive pressure to really take advantage of that Volt switch, like that Volt turn core that those three are really forming right here. There's a lot of really naturally bulky mons, none of which really have great, sweeping or really scary potential outside of it. I do like Corviknight a lot, but it loses. I like Corviknight, but on this build in particular, I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of it, because usually you want Corviknight to support your offense and you turn it in and maybe pull up a Volk up Sweep every once in a while, but you want to be a good supportive piece. And I feel like it loses to a lot of the same offensive threats that his offense already loses to. So I don't know if it has great defensive synergy in that sense. He has very middling speed, in my opinion. I think Hitmonlee is dope on this team, though. I actually really love Hitmonlee here for the team. Again, I really like that kind of offensive momentum core and Rillaboom and Darmanitan and Galvantula. I just wish there was a little bit more punch and power opposed to some of these more middling mons here, kind of at the bottom for him.
So the main reason why I had Mario on my rankings a little bit higher is because I really like his offense. Like Galvantula is a really good momentum gainer as well that makes a really good Volt Turn core. The fact that he has Unburden with Hitmonlee, even though Hitmonlee is not really the best option ever, is still something that opponents are going to have to prep for. The main issues I don't like with this team, I suppose, are the Turtonator. I feel like Turtonator is not a Pokemon that should probably never be drafted unless you have absolutely nothing else to get. Also, I'm really not sold on the Galar Slowbro. Like, yeah, its ability is really good, but it doesn't get teleport. Even though its defenses are a little bit more balanced than Slowking or regular Slowbro, I don't really necessarily know what it's going to want to do, honestly. So if you factor out Turtonator, then this draft is pretty solid. Like Rillaboom G-Maxed is absolutely terrifying. Like, it can tank a hit, do damage if it ends up going to its normal form after G-Maxing. Then it still gets Grassy Glide in terrain, and then if Mario is able to Swords Dance or even bulk up, that's going to be absolutely terrifying. Corviknight in itself is able to handle more or less what Rillaboom is weak to besides fire types, which is why he more than likely did draft the Jellicent. I'm also not really a big fan of his hazard mons, mainly being the Mudsdale, but besides that, like, he has a really good offensive core with Darmanitan, Galvantula, Hitmonlee if it's able to get rid of its offensive cores. Sneasel always will be offensive as well. Rillaboom more than likely as a Gmax Mon will also be offensive. So I can definitely see the flaws, but I personally had this a little bit higher, but I can also see why it would be a little bit lower on your aspect. So my number 11, which was Max Raptor and the Tasmanian Toxicroaks, who we already went over. We also went over the Vancouver Corviknights for OG and the San Diego Snugglers for myself. And then at number 9, OG had the New England Snowcloaks, aka Liv, but I ended up having the New Britain Rockruffs, which OG ended up having a little bit higher, but me personally, the main thing I didn't like about Die, and obviously like these rankings are anything personal or anything like that, it's just really draft wise, is that like look at his speed tiers. His fastest mon is Lycanroc, which, let's be honest, offensively it's not taking hits obviously, and then he drops immediately to Jirachi, which is a giant speed gap in itself. Also, his stealth rockers are basically non-existent. You never really want Jirachi to run rocks. If it is running rocks, is defensive. Like, I guess Duraludon, even though it is his Gmax Mon, could run rocks, but then you sacrifice a potential offensive move, which is something your opponent can take advantage of. And Lycanroc obviously will more than likely never be running rocks in general. His removal is also really not that good. It seems like he's really reliant on heavy duty boots and Vikavolt, Togekiss, Kyurem, even potentially Flareon. Like, Flareon is nice as a fire type to be able to pass wishes, but realistically, how many times is he going to want to bring that Skuntank? Also, I'm also really upset the fact that he picked Skuntank because I really wanted it, but we're gonna try and see past that. It's fine. But his team doesn't necessarily have that many hard-hitting mons besides something like Kyurem and Gmax Duraludon. Like, he has good setup options in Togekiss, Girder, and Jirachi, and his momentum isn't necessarily that great either. I really don't like that he doesn't have good hazard mons or good momentum gainers, but his team does still have pretty solid potential regardless, in my opinion. Like, this is definitely something that seems like more of a balanced draft. Like, yeah, I can't do one thing essentially spectacular, but it does everything okay.
So I had Jay a little bit higher. Again, this might be a little biased too, because I did help him draft this a lot. BJ good buddies, and these are all mons I absolutely love. I do totally agree though in the fact that his team is a little slow. I also hate not having him on faster than 110. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in the draft when it doesn't have that thing passed in. But in a limited dex, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, I mean, it sucks, but it's not the craziest in the world. There's plenty of teams in this league right now that actually don't have him on past 110, which again isn't great, but not the worst thing. I love Kyurem Kiss as a core. I think they're obviously phenomenal together. I think they cover each other really well. The flinch core is obviously really annoying in itself, but a good builder and players will obviously utilize Rachi and Kiss in different ways opposed to this. As for his rockers, not the best. Lycanroc Dust is a good fast potential rocker, but I feel like he's going to be forced into rocks on Duraludon a lot, which isn't the best on your Gmax one, because obviously you want to run 4 hard-hitting moves because you're getting big and you're supposed to be doing lots of damage. So fitting the best coverage on possible is nice, but inexperienced using Duraludon, it doesn't have the craziest coverage regardless. So it's not the biggest deal to be forced into running rocks as your 4th move, because of the fact that it's not like you're running, insane coverage otherwise anyways. You're going to be running stabs, which already cover most of the game really well. Then you'll be having like a Thunderbolt or maybe like a Body Press or, something like that tacked onto there. I think webs with Vikavolt are great with this team though, because it obviously helps kind of bridge that kind of, subpar speed for this team. Kyurem under webs is terrifying. Lycanroc this gen is one of my favorite and most slept on mons. I think this thing getting close combat is terrifying. It's just basically mini faster Terrakion. A little bit, maybe potentially a little bit weaker, but still, a little bit faster, still an absolute menace with the Accelerock priority as well, which is obviously super dope. I like his potential removal. It's not the worst thing in the world, in my opinion. it does look on outset like he has a lot of pressure on Togekiss to defog, but I think Girder is actually a pretty reliable defogger in itself. I think Skuntank can always get one off with its decent natural bulk too. So if he really needs to get away hazards to not deal with those, chipping out his team and not force him into boots, cure him, and things like that, which obviously is an absolute drag with that mon. Being able to run Specs or Scarf or Life Orb is obviously nice on it. I think that's very solid. I think this team's 100% predicated on how well Jay can use Kirim, though. I think he has the pieces to potentially wear down and break through all of the checks to it on his potential roster. Like, I like the Double Dragon Core because they kind of break for each other and wear down each other's checks very, very well. It's just all going to be kind of predicated on how well he kind of utilizes that really bulky Rachi Kirim Kiss core and kind of puts on pressure with those guys.
So it's still a solid draft overall. It could probably be a little bit higher, but definitely not lower than most of our other drafts. So moving on to our next rankings here. So we already went over the Lake District Spirits and the Scandinavian Stoutlands. Mono Rain is not the worst ever, but if utilized properly can definitely be scary. Skyrander's draft is a little bit terrifying as well if it can be used versatile more than what it seems like on paper. So moving on to our 7th rankings here, we have 2 teams we already went over. Personally, I had the Happy Valley Harayamas. They have a lot of good offensive options as well, even though they might have 1 or 2 mons that may not necessarily come every single week. It's not really that big of an issue. And then OG had the Montreal Milotics, which had also very scary offensive options in Porygon Z. Urshifu is definitely terrifying. Raichu very speedy, being able to set up, and good momentum in the forms of Baton Pass Sylveon and a Teleport Slowbro. So moving on to our 6th ranking here, which is the one ranking we have equally, is actually OGalbina here, the co-commissioner of the GDL. So I guess I'll kind of get this started. I'm not gonna lie, my biggest gripe with this draft are the speed tiers. Like, yeah, Talonflame and Dugtrio are really, really fast, but if rocks get up, then Talonflame is not a Pokemon. Dugtrio is either gonna trap something, get up rocks, or KO something. It's never going to always get up rocks and KO, or trap and do significant damage, if you get what I'm saying. Another thing I didn't really like is that alongside Dugtrio, OG's only real stealth rocker is Rhydon, which, I mean, yeah, Rhydon can be reliable in certain aspects, but if it's always going to be your stealth rocker, then your future opponents are going to be able to take advantage of that and prep accordingly. Like, Keldeo offensively paired up with Scizor is really, really amazing because Scizor gets rid of any psychics or grass types that Keldeo doesn't want to deal with. I'm also a big fan of the Sticky Webs option because that really helps the Drapion and the Keldeo in this type of build. Otherwise, it does have some potential good offensive options. Defensively also, it doesn't seem necessarily that good. Like, there's not really many good fat mons that would like to switch into more offensive drafts. But let me know what you thought, OG. Also, yeah, the person who made the GFX spelled Miami wrong.
Brody. And the amount of time I've spent with Brody for him to spell my team name wrong out of all of them, I'm so upset. But regardless, I didn't really rank my team. I just kind of threw my team wherever Leo put it. It definitely has its own flaws. I talked about this in my own draft analysis. I have a lot of double up typings. It doesn't have the greatest defensive synergy, but the main goal I was going with this team is obviously lots and lots of momentum and pivoting, wearing down checks in order to set up an endgame. Either Scizor or more than likely Keldeo really can go in. Obviously, the rocks option isn't the best, and the speed tiers option, well, I don't really count Dougie into my speed tiers because, like Leo was saying, it's not really a Pokemon I really see in a role other than it's Dugtrio. Dugtrio is coming, and it's going to come specifically to beat 1 or 2 Pokemon, and that's it. Talonflame, though, I do like with the speed tier option. I do disagree a little bit just because boots still exist, and obviously I do have to be careful about being knocked, and I am kind of locked into an item a good majority of the time. But even then, I do have decent enough hazard control where I think I can potentially even mitigate bringing that. Gmax wise, I love my Gmax. I think it's going to be so much fun with Dougie being able to trap a lot, or at least force shed shells and Shukaberries on a lot of these steel types that would really, really threaten outcreate me and a lot of other threats on my team. I think the team's a lot of fun. It definitely has its flaws, but it's a really, really offensive build that's just predicated on me being really aggressive and ballsy and catching my opponent on switches and just pivoting around really a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely a solid draft. It definitely has potential as well. So moving on to our 5th round picks here. OG had the New Britain Rock Roughs, which we already went over. I also had Frosted as my number 5 pick, which we went over. So moving on to our number 4 picks here, we have the New Orleans Saints on my number 4, and for OG's side, we have the Alabama Rollouts. So I guess I'll let OG talk about the Alabama Rollouts here because I had them a little bit higher. So let's see what he has to say about them.
So these top 4 are really hard for me. I think all of these top 4 teams are like ridiculously good. I think
these top 4 are definitely like easily like top 4.
A good cut above the rest. Yeah. So this was Mid's team, and I love this team. It has good solid speed tiers on this build. Another thing I really like about this team is Gengar plus Urshifu is terrifying. That sounds so disgusting to switch into, especially with the great Volt turn that he has. It's going to be an absolute pain to try and deal with that offensive core. He has great fairy resistance supporting Urshifu and Bronzong and Arcanine with good wish support to potentially keep that Zong healthy. And obviously Arcanine can keep itself healthy, but it'll obviously appreciate said wish support. The only gripes I have for this team, again, I love this team. I love it offensively. I love it defensively. It's super solid. The only thing I don't like is it struggles a little bit with offensive grounds outside of Rotom as well as strong fires. So I think this team puts a little bit too much pressure on Rotom Wash. Obviously, he does have that wish support, but I think there's a little bit too much pressure on Rotom, and he might get overwhelmed in the few games there, which could be a little bit scary for his fat. And then the last thing is I don't think Lanoon should be on this team. I love Lanoon. I think it's a great low-tier pick, but when you already have a normal type and you already have an offensive normal type with priority, I don't see the need for a Lanoon on your team. There might be something better you could grab. But other than that, this team is phenomenal. I really do love this team a lot.
Yeah, that's fair. I had him a little bit higher up on my rankings, but I do agree that Linoon kind of seems a little bit out of place. But at the same time, even though he does have a Diggersby, Linoon is one of those mons that maybe 1 or 2 coaches might overlook. And I feel like maybe he might have got Linoon to be like, oh, well, if people overlook this mon, then if I bring it as Belly Drum Extreme Speed, it can definitely sweep. His momentum gainers are really, really good, as you mentioned as well. He's got a solid Volt Turn core. Realistically, the only thing I don't really like about this team is that I wish he had another Stealth Walker, but let's be honest, Bronzong and Dredagon will 100%, I would literally bet my life on the fact that Dredagon and Bronzong will always, in any single matchup, be able to get up Stealth Rocks. Even if you bring in Taunt, eventually he's going to be able to bring in one or the other to get them up regardless. Diggersby having spikes is not necessarily the most common move to run when it comes to matchups, and even though, yes, Diggersby did lose return, Body Slam still does ridiculous damage. Earthquake is really, really good. It still gets access to really good coverage moves as well. And then the fact that Gengar is able to essentially break down or beat most of the fairy types that Gmax Urshifu doesn't like is absolutely terrifying. Lilligant as a grass type is a little bit bad, but he's got Levitate Bronzong and Levitate Rotom Wash, essentially 2 of the best ground type answers, as well as having a great wish support mon. B tiers are a little bit bad, but realistically his draft doesn't necessarily care about them because he has such good momentum. He's got the Trick Room option and he has the momentum gainers to be able to kind of nullify that. So yeah, this is why I personally had him at rank 2, but I really feel like this was definitely one of the absolute best drafts. Plus, a little spoiler, he definitely has better knockoff switch-ins than one of the other drafts here. So, moving on to our rank 3s here. I had myself at rank number 3, and OG had the New Orleans Saints at rank number 3. I had the New Orleans Saint Snows at my rank number 4. Now, the reason why I had them at my rank number 4 is, again, speed tiers mainly. He doesn't really have that fast of a draft. Another thing I didn't necessarily like was that his removal options for G-Max Charizard are not necessarily that good. Like, yeah, he has Defog Hydreigon, but if you're forcing Hydreigon to run Defog, that's honestly kind of bad because Hydreigon likes to be Nasty Plot 3 attacks, even Dragon Dance 3 attacks, Scarfed 4 attacks as well. He does have Rapid Spin on Tentacruel, but if he's facing opponents with a good Ghost type, they can deal with that. Hatterene as well is not necessarily that reliable either. So essentially, if anybody does get a Brox against Ultra Player here, then G-Max Charizard is not that much of an issue. But let's be honest, G-Max Charizard alone is definitely a top tier G-Max Mon because it can easily by itself sweep or break down through so many teams. He does also have an amazing Fairy Steel Dragon Core in Aegislash, Hydreigon, and Hatterene. Even Slurpuff could fill that role of Hatterene, and Slurpuff does get access to Sticky Webs, which is definitely something that Charizard and Hydreigon really, really like. I'm not a big fan of Thwackey and Sock, but I'm definitely sure he can make those work.
So yeah, you touched on a lot of the things that I was thinking. Obviously, Hydra AG Hat is disgusting, and G-Max Zard. I think his top 4 picks or so were absolutely insane. I do very much so agree, though, the fact that his hazard removal is pretty whack. Obviously, like you said, Hydra never wants to run it. Tentacruel is a solid rapid spinner, but depending on the matchup, it might not be the best at it. And then Magic Bounce Hat isn't the bulky spawn. So that's a little bit iffy when you have a G-Max Zard, but the rest of his team isn't super hazardy, but obviously rocks are going to come because of the rocks. So that's something he's going to have to keep in mind and play around, I think, in my mind. A little bit slow of a team, but obviously has the Sticky Web support. But one thing in particular that I really love is out of that Dragon Fairy Steel core is the Fairy Steel part about it. I've drafted Aegislash Hatterene before, and I think they pair together phenomenally. Obviously, giving him a little bit of Trick Room support for more offensive Aegislash, which is obviously super nice. And then one thing that I think Hatterene gets that Aegislash loves is going to be Healing Wish. I think Healing Wish, like maybe Trick Room into Healing Wish or just Healing Wish into AG in the late game is so nice because it's so bulky and it's so strong. But when you spend the whole game wearing it down just for it to get Healing Wish back up, a lot of teams won't be able to recover. I think his team's a little bit top heavy, but I think the top heavy part of it is so good. I think he'll have a phenomenal season. And there are a lot of mons that he's used really successfully in the past too. So I really do see him killing it.
Yeah, he does have a solid like 4 or 5 mons he could honestly bring every single week. So yeah, definitely a top 5 draft regardless. So moving on to our number 3 ranking here. I put myself at number 3. OG put the New Orleans Saints at number 3. So I guess I personally don't want to talk about my draft, so we're gonna kind of shift a little bit here as to why OG put me at number 2, and already went over the fact as to why I put the Alabama rollouts at my number 2 or just higher in general.
I put at 2 because first of all, you have Mew in Galar decks. I'm so upset that people voted and allowed because I think that's just disgusting. This mon is by far, in my opinion, even with their restrictions there, I think it's by far the best mon in the format at this point in the metagame, at least in my opinion. There's great speed tiers on this team. I think this team is really well formulated around Mew. It's never really pigeonholed into a specific role. You have great hazards, good removal, good fighting checks, which all open up Mew to potentially do whatever it wants. I mean, it could still obviously be fat. It can still obviously have, run spikes or toxic spikes or something like that. But you can run offensive and set up, or you can. It just opens up the versatility of you, which is very nice for this. What do you call it? Comfey on paper as a fairy is a little bit underwhelming just because of no hidden power, but I really do think it fits well on this team in particular because it baits in the things that Mamoswine and Cinderace want free switches in on. and really let you kind of, really wall break with those two, breaking them down for a potential Scolopy endgame or a potential Mew endgame if you're set up Mew, which I think is very solid. Gmax Copperage is really nice, giving you even more hazards to potentially help out with a potential Mew endgame because it's not the strongest thing in the world. So even after setup, it does appreciate that, the rocks, the spikes, and even the Steel Surge going up is obviously dope. One thing I will say is I think at this point, a good offensive ground kind of does give you the work. Because Trevenant's a cool Pokemon, but I don't know if it's the most reliable ground resist in the world. Vullaby potentially can check some offensive grounds if they aren't packing any setup or something like that. Same with Rotom, but it's something I think that the team does struggle with a bit is a really strong offensive ground type. It isn't great resistance to it outside of Trevenant. If they have any coverage for that, or if they wear down throughout the game, that can be an issue. But overall, the team is really, really solid, and it supports the best model format really phenomenally. So I feel like the team can, kind of speak for itself in that sense.
Well, thank you. The main reason why I didn't want to put myself a little bit higher too is that I don't necessarily have the best knockoff switch in. Like a really good offensive dark type could be a little bit of an issue. Yeah, I have Comfy. Priority is nice, but coverage, if the dark type has it, I get you. Yeah, Skuntank or Drapion could be a bit of a problem, but I don't want to sound biased or egotistical or conceited, but I definitely still thought I had one of the better drafts. But I think we can both agree that at number 1 we have Vepsis and the Helsinki Hydreigons, and this draft is absolutely disgusting. First off, Dragapult is an insane Pokemon. Whoever thinks Dragapult is a bad Pokemon in general is just bad at draft league, period. Dragapult is absolutely insane. It does so much. It can do so much, which is crazy. Factor in that he has G-Max Grimmsnarl as his fairy type is also absolutely terrifying, because that in itself is a giant, scary issue to deal with. And then his steel type is tier 2 Skarmory, which is insane as a fairy steel dragon core. My only real issue with Vepsis' draft is that he has a Alolan Dugtrio. That's literally it. Yeah, his speed tiers are really not that good. He goes Dragapult, Boltund into the Dugtrio and Celebi. I really feel like he could have got something else besides Alolan Dougie. I don't really know why he got it. I guess Stealth Rocks, but Skarmory and Celebi are reliable Stealth Rockers regardless. He's got good spikers in Quillfish, and even Skarmory can spikes, and Heracross gets spikes as well. So yeah, besides Alolan Dougie, I don't really see a giant issue with this draft. I guess realistically, I don't ever see him bringing Boltund or Alolan Dougie. Honestly, do you see that? Because I don't.
I honestly think the only reason he did pick up Dougie and potentially a Boltund is to kind of bridge that speed gap, because obviously at the point in which he got Dougie, he jumped from Celebi, that base 100 mark, all the way to Boltund. So obviously getting some of the bridge is nice. But yeah, if a coach is extra aggressive and they're it's in a low Dugtrio, you aren't bringing it, then they can potentially still take advantage of those speed tiers. But at the same time, that can work to his advantage. It's kind of like the Lanoon thing with mid that you were mentioning a little bit earlier, where someone could potentially sleep on him where this gives him a more offensive steal. And I think Alolan Dougie does help in that sense, because it gives him a little bit more of a reliable fairy breaker than a steel type like Skarmory. So that can obviously be nice in itself, I guess.
That's fair.
Like you said, this team is nuts. I think this team is a good blueprint if you want to draft Dragapult on how to support Dragapult.
Oh, I love Dragapult. It's so good. Dragapult is so good. If anybody tells you Dragapult is bad, they're bad. End of discussion. There's no more continuing the conversation. Sorry, continue. I'm sorry.
I was very passionate.
I love Dragapult. I love it.
Someone last week.
I love it.
But this team in particular supports it phenomenally. I really do think that with this build and with how talented of a player Vepsis really is, that I think that this team will have Dragapult as GDL's kill leader this season. I really do. I think the hazard control and support with it is insane, and pulls someone that really does appreciate spikes and rocks and stuff like that being on the field and forcing that chip damage and things. Because while it's amazingly fast, it's really versatile and stuff like that. It's not the most powerful Pokemon in the format. So obviously giving that extra chip to make those, 3 KOs, 2 KOs and stuff like that is really, really solid for it. It's Ghost and Fairy and Dragon Resist are nuts. Like Snorlax is great with this thing. Obviously Skarm is phenomenal. Rotom Heat's great for getting it in and out. He has Rocks options in Celebi and Skarmory and Dougie and things like that. He has his T-Spike option in Quillfish. Like, this team is so perfectly formulated around Dragapult and Grimmsnarl to an extent. I think it's going to perform phenomenally. I really do think this team is, like, by far the best one. I absolutely love this build.
Yeah, if I had to bet money on one team out of our 16 amazing coaches making playoffs, besides me, it would definitely be it would definitely be Vepsis. Like, this draft is insane. I'm sure there are probably some flaws that we're kind of overlooking, but we're not sitting here spending 3, 4, 5 hours like dissecting every single aspect of every team. But this is definitely, in both of our opinions, easily the absolute best team drafted throughout this GDL Season 2. So, with that being said, if you stuck throughout the entire video, please let us know in the comment section below. Do you agree with our rankings? Do you think maybe we were wrong or something? I'm not sure. Let us know in the comment section below. As well, in the description are the links to every single coach for GDL Season 2, as well as a link to our Twitter, which we are going to be active throughout the entire season. So give that a follow, check out every single coach. And with that being said, the official week 1 uploads will be the 20th of July 2020. So mark your calendars, subscribe to everybody, watch every single match, and make sure to support all of our coaches. So with that being said, leave a like, leave a comment, and we will see you all next time. Thank you for watching. Later, everybody. Do you have anything else to say, OG?
Nope. Excited to get this season going. Let's hope it's a good one.
Say bye.
Bye. Oh, see ya.
My brain and heart are both tied in the knot, and this hinders me from crying a lot. This causing me to show no emotion. But when I said I cared, I wasn't joking. But I guess it's too late for me to become broken. For now, I'm living with no more pain, tears, or hoping. I'm just coasting. Yeah, I said I'm coasting. No more pain, tears, and hoping.